Imagine buying a house, but every single time you want to move the sofa to the other side of your living room, you actually have to hire a structural engineer to knock down a wall and pour new concrete.
Right, and you're paying that engineer like $150 an hour just for the
Yeah.
privilege, all while your family is just standing around waiting to sit down.
Exactly. I mean, we like to think of our physical spaces as these easily adaptable things, but in that scenario, you are completely locked in by the architecture.
Yeah, it sounds ridiculous for a physical house, but honestly, that's exactly what running a Shopify storefront felt like for years.
Welcome to the deep dive. That structural engineer analogy, that was the daily reality. Every minor adjustment required a major technical intervention.
It really did.
So today, we're looking at some 2026 technical guides to unpack how the platform finally, fired the structural engineers and gave the house back to the owners.
Yeah, we were pulling insights from a really comprehensive breakdown of Shopify Online Store 2.0, looking at its architecture, how it fundamentally changes a merchant's workday, and how to know if you're secretly still living in one of those old, rigid houses.
And our mission today is really to demystify exactly how that works for you. Whether you're running an online store yourself, maybe you're consulting for a brand, or you're just insanely curious about e-commerce tech, we want to cut through the developer jargon.
Absolutely. The core theme running through the source material is this idea of taking power back from developers without actually making those developers obsolete.
Right. But, to understand whether you or your client should actually invest the time and money to migrate to this new architecture, we first have to understand the old world.
You really have to feel the pain of the past to appreciate the solution here.
Okay, let's unpack this. What exactly made that old world so painful?
Well, the technical guides refer to that old world as vintage themes. Basically, this is everything built before 2021. And in that vintage era, the only page you could truly assemble, rearrange, and customize easily through Visual Editor was the home page.
Just the homepage.
Just the home page. Every other page on your site, the
Yeah.
product page, the collection grid, the shopping cart, was a fixed file written in Shopify's proprietary coding language, which is called Liquid.
Meaning, if you wanted your product page to look slightly different than the default layout, say you just wanted to move the product description above the Add to Cart button, you had to dive into the raw code.
Oh, it was worse than that.
Yeah.
If you messed up a single comma or like a closed bracket in that raw Liquid code while trying to move that button, you could take down your entire storefront.
Wow. Right during a massive Black Friday sale or something?
Yeah, exactly. It was incredibly fragile.
Yeah.
If you wanted a custom layout, it was like painting a mural directly onto a brick wall. If you want to move the tree in the mural, you can't just slide it
You
over.
have to scrape off the paint, prep the brick, and paint it all over again. So then in 2021, Shopify introduces Online Store 2.0. And from what I'm reading in the source material, it wasn't just like a new subscription plan. It was a complete architectural overhaul that turned themes into composable documents.
They completely abandoned the brick wall. OS 2.0 operates on a totally different set of rules. The biggest shift is replacing those rigid Liquid files with JSON templates.
Jason, can you explain that for the non-technical folks?
Yeah, JSON is just a really lightweight data format used to store and transport information. So instead of a massive, terrifying file of code, a template is now just a simple JSON object that acts like a grocery list for your browser.
A grocery list. Okay.
Right, it simply lists which sections should render on the screen, in what order, and with what specific settings.
Because it's just a list of instructions, you aren't hard-coding the layout anymore. It sounds more like a gallery wall of framed pictures.
Yes, that's a great way to look at
You
it.
can just take a frame off the hook and move it to the other side of the room without touching the paint on the wall.
That is the exact mechanism. And because of that flexibility, the system allows for sections everywhere.
So you aren't restricted to just the home page anymore.
Exactly. Every single page becomes a stack of sections that you control. You can reuse the same product template across your entire catalog, or you can spin up a totally unique one-off template for a limited collaboration.
All without writing a single line of code.
Not one line. They even applied this logic to the header and footer of the site, turning them into customizable section groups.
That is huge. And this actually brings up another massive pain point from the vintage era apps.
Oh yeah, apps were a nightmare.
Right. In the old days, if I wanted to add like a customer review widget or a loyalty banner, that third-party app had to actually inject its own raw code directly into my theme's files.
It was incredibly invasive.
Yeah.
And, when you decided to uninstall that app a year later, It rarely cleaned up after
So
itself.
you're just left with these orphan snippets of code scattered everywhere.
Yeah, slowing things down, causing bizarre glitches. But OS 2.0 solves this by introducing app blocks. Apps now install their user interface cleanly as standalone blocks.
So the merchant can just hide them, drag them around, or delete them right in the visual editor.
Exactly. When you delete the app, the block simply vanishes. No code residue left behind.
So what does this all actually mean for the people running the business? The operational shift here seems, well, massive.
It is. We're literally moving the workflow from developer time, where someone has to write code, test the build, and push it live to editor time.
Where a marketing manager just clicks and drags a panel in their settings dashboard.
It democratizes the storefront. The developers aren't gone, right? Their role has just evolved. You still need them to build highly bespoke custom sections.
But it significantly raises the floor of what a non-technical merchant can execute independently on a Tuesday morning.
Exactly.
Let's actually talk about that Tuesday morning scenario, because moving from high-level architecture to daily operations is where it gets real. The modularity of sections and blocks sounds great in theory, but the source material spends a massive amount of time on something called the no-code data layer, specifically metafields and dynamic sources.
What's fascinating here is that while dragging sections around gets all the attention, this data layer is the real everyday superpower of OS 2.0.
Okay, break that down for me.
So think about a standard Shopify product page. By default, the platform gives you a title, a price, a description box, and images.
Sure, the basics.
But what if you sell high-end electronics and you need a highly structured technical spec table? Or say you sell organic skincare and you need a dedicated list of active ingredients for every single serum.
Right. In a vintage theme, getting that custom data to display consistently was a total nightmare.
Yeah, you'd have to create a hard-coded liquid snippet for every single product variant.
So if you had 500 products, you were dealing with a massive headache every time your supplier updated a single ingredient.
Precisely. It was a terrible maintenance bottleneck.
Ooh.
So OS 2.0 introduces metafields directly into the core workflow to solve this.
And metafields are basically just custom database fields, right?
Exactly. You create them right in the admin dashboard. You define a field called active ingredients, and it just appears as a simple text box on every product page in your backend.
But the real magic is how that data actually gets onto the live website, because the guide highlights dynamic sources as the missing link.
Yes. Dynamic sources make those metafields bindable inside the theme editor.
Bindable.
Yeah, so you drag a text block onto your product page template, but instead of typing static text into it, which would just show the exact same words on every product, you click a tiny database icon.
Oh, I see. You bind that text block to your active ingredients metafield.
Exactly, meaning the setting in the editor acts like a magnet. When a customer clicks on the vitamin C serum, the block pulls in the vitamin C ingredients.
And when they click on the retinol cream, it pulls in the retinol ingredients. The template stays exactly the same, but the data changes dynamically based on what you are looking at.
It is brilliant because it completely changes who owns what job. This is the concept of the separation of powers.
So the developer acts as the architect.
Right. They own the schema design. They define what custom fields exist in the database. And the theme developer builds the reusable section, the typography, the padding, the layout.
But the actual weekly job of entering that content now belongs entirely to the merchant team.
Exactly. The merchant just types the new ingredients into a standard text box on the admin dashboard, completely untouched by theme code.
I have to push back here, though.
Sure.
If you give the merchant team all the power to just punch in data for hundreds of products or drag and drop sections on a whim, isn't there a huge risk they completely break the visual design of the site?
How so?
Well, what if the marketing intern decides to write a whole novel in the ingredient box? Doesn't that blow up the page layout?
That is the exact tension this separation of powers solves.
Yeah.
The brilliance of OS 2.0 is that it protects the design by isolating it from the data.
Oh.
The developer builds the dynamic, source-friendly setting. They build a container. The merchant just provides the content that flows into it.
So if the intern writes a novel,
The container might scroll or truncate with a Read More button based on the rules the developer set. The aesthetic integrity of the site is protected, but the data remains incredibly flexible.
that's really clever. Okay, so OS 2.0 is empowering. It separates design from content, saves thousands in developer maintenance. But we need a reality check. The guide is very clear that there are boundaries and pitfalls here. Where does OS 2.0 actually stop?
It is crucial to understand its limitations. First and foremost, The checkout is a completely separate universe. OS 2.0 only governs the storefront. Everything leading up to the moment a customer clicks, proceed to checkout.
Wait, so if the checkout is totally walled off, does that mean all this drag and drop freedom vanishes the second the customer actually tries to give me their money?
For the vast majority of merchants, yes. And for very good reason. Checkout requires bulletproof security and compliance.
Right, you definitely do not want a random third-party app injecting code into a page where credit card numbers are being typed.
Exactly. If you want to customize the checkout, that runs on a completely different framework called checkout extensibility. And that is restricted entirely to merchants on the enterprise-level Shopify Plus plan.
Okay, so it's not governed by the standard OS 2.0 theme editor at all. That is a critical distinction for anyone planning a migration. What other boundaries are there?
Well, there is no server-side state in these new JSON sections.
Let's translate that for the non-engineers. What does a lack of server-side state actually mean for a shopper's experience?
It means these sections have no memory. They render data at the exact fraction of a second the page is requested.
So say you want a feature where a customer clicks a favorite icon on a product, and you want the site to remember that across different pages.
Right, or even when they come back tomorrow.
Yeah.
Because these sections don't communicate back and forth with a persistent server database, they can't natively remember state.
So if you need something stateful, like a saved cart that persists across devices, or gated content where the server needs to verify a membership, you still need custom app development.
Exactly. You still need a more complex front end for that. And the guide also warns that vintage features do not automatically port over during an upgrade.
Right, so if you spent heavily on custom liquid code or hard-coded SEO metadata back in 2019, it doesn't just magically transform into an OS 2.0 section when you hit update.
It definitely doesn't. But honestly, the most dangerous pitfall highlighted in our source material is what they call the performance trap.
The performance trap.
Yeah, because OS 2.0 makes every single section an app block, a JavaScript surface. It places a massive burden on the browser.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. By making it so beautifully easy for a merchant to just click Add Block, didn't Shopify essentially hand them a loaded gun for their own site speed?
They absolutely handed them a double-edged sword. Think about what happens when you drag an app block into a page. You aren't just adding a picture of a review widget.
You're inviting a third-party server to inject its own code.
Exactly. Right at the moment a customer tries to load it. So if a merchant gets carried away and stacks 20 different third-party app blocks onto a single product page, an upsell carousel here, a loyalty banner there, a sizing calculator.
They are forcing the customer's browser to connect to 20 different servers simultaneously.
And if even one of those external servers is having a slow day, it creates a traffic jam. It blocks the main thread. This completely degrades your core web vitals.
Specifically, things like your LCP largest contentful paint, which is how long it takes for the main image to appear, and your CLS cumulative layout shift.
Yes.
Cumulative layout shift is the absolute worst. That's when you go to tap a button on your phone, but right before your finger hits the glass, a late-loading banner suddenly pops in, pushes the whole page down, and you end up clicking on an ad instead.
It completely destroys trust and conversion rates. The OS 2.0 architecture inherently rewards discipline.
Because it's so frictionless to add things, you have to actively go in and remove unused blocks and apps.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It fundamentally shifts site speed from being just a developer's problem to being an ongoing merchant responsibility.
So with great power comes great responsibility for your page load times. Now, if you are listening to this and wondering where your store or your client store actually stands today, we need to look at the 2026 landscape and run a diagnostic.
The guide breaks down the current state of play beautifully. For years, the foundational flagship OS 2.0 theme was called Dawn.
Right.
It was the mature, stable bedrock from 2020 through 2024. But in 2025, Shopify shipped a new flagship called Horizon.
And Horizon introduced a totally refreshed editor experience. It tightened up the default performance budget to help prevent that trap we just discussed, and it introduced generative AI blocks.
Yes, but the source points out that both Dawn and Horizon are OS 2.0 to the core. Choosing between them is just a matter of aesthetic design and interface preference, not a choice of underlying architecture.
Okay, so how does someone actually figure out if they are riding the OS 2.0 wave or if they are secretly stuck in a vintage house?
The guide offers a brilliant 30-second audit you can do right now.
Okay, wait on me.
Imagine you are in your Shopify admin dashboard. Go to your theme editor and switch the preview dropdown from the homepage to any product template. Try to click and drag a section on that product page, like moving the description under the image gallery.
And if you can move and reorder sections, you are on OS 2.0.
Exactly. If it's a fixed, unmovable layout, you're on vintage.
So that's the product page test. And there's an app block test too, right?
Yes. Click Add Block in any section. If you see third-party app blocks listed right alongside your native theme blocks, that's a massive OS 2.0 signal.
And finally, the metafield binding test, right?
Click on any text setting in the editor. If there's a tiny, distinct database icon next to the text field that lets you connect to a dynamic source, you have OS 2.0.
And for the developers listening, there's a bonus check.
Sure.
Open your store's code editor and look at the templates folder. If those files end in .json, congratulations, you're in the modern era.
And if they end in .liquid, you are dealing with vintage tech.
But let me stop you there, because I know people run into this exact scenario. What if I bought a premium, highly designed theme back in 2019? It looks absolutely stunning. The animations are smooth, the typography is gorgeous. It can't possibly be outdated tech if it looks that good. Right.
This is perhaps the most common misconception merchants have. Visual design and underlying architecture are entirely independent.
Interesting.
A beautifully designed site can absolutely be running on archaic, rigid code. On the flip side, a theme vendor might have quietly updated that 2019 theme to OS 2.0 under the hood without changing a single pixel of the visual design.
So you cannot judge the architecture by looking at the aesthetics of the live site. You must run that 30-second audit in the back end.
Exactly.
So let's say I take an inventory of my messy kitchen, I ran the audit, and I realize I am firmly stuck in the vintage era. How do I actually cross the bridge to Horizon or Dawn or any modern premium theme without burning my business down in the process?
The transition is a structured renovation, and the guide breaks it down into 5 phases. You cannot skip phase 1, which is auditing your customizations.
Right. You have to comb through your current theme and inventory, every custom liquid snippet, every hard-coded app integration, and every specialized layout.
Exactly. You need to know exactly what pots and pans you own before you tear down the cabinets.
And once you know what you have, phase 2 is laying down the new floor plan, picking your target OS 2.0 theme.
You decide if you're migrating to Horizon for the AI features, Dawn for mature stability, or buying a new premium theme. Then phase 3 is the heavy lifting, porting the content.
This is where you actually rebuild those bespoke product layouts using the new sections and mapping your data into those metafields we discussed.
Yes. And phase 4 is where the real danger lies, reinstalling apps.
Why is that so dangerous?
Because you have to check if your existing apps actually support OS 2.0 app blocks. Many older apps relied entirely on injecting raw code. So if you have an app that was abandoned by its developer years ago and never updated to the new standard, do not force that dead integration into your clean new theme.
That abandoned app is basically your trigger to go to the App Store and find a modern replacement.
Precisely. Finally, phase 5 is quality assurance. You do all of this work on a duplicated, unpublished draft theme.
You run your performance checks on those core web vitals, test the checkout flow, and then make the swap to publish the new theme during your lowest traffic hours.
Because it is a true renovation, there's a financial reality to consider here too. The guide outlines the spectrum of costs.
Right. What are we talking about here?
Well, a DIY migration on a free theme like Dawn might just cost you your own sweat equity, maybe 20 to 60 hours of mapping fields and moving blocks.
Okay, but what about a custom build?
A fully custom OS 2.0 build, engineered by an agency with complex user experiences and specialized data architectures. That could take 6 to 14 weeks and cost anywhere from $8,000 to over $40,000.
Wow. Which naturally brings up the 80-20 rule the guide mentions. If a brand is going to spend $40,000 renovating, when is OS 2.0 the right choice? And when do they need to look at something far more extreme, like going entirely headless?
This raises an important question about the trajectory of e-commerce. You see, OS 2.0 natively handles massive platform expansions today.
Like using Shopify markets to sell internationally with localized currencies.
Exactly. Or deploying B2B features for wholesale company accounts. OS 2.0 supports all of that right out of the box with native blocks.
But headless commerce, which usually means utilizing Shopify's Hydrogen framework, is a totally different beast. What does that actually mean mechanically?
Going headless means you are physically severing the back-end database from the front-end visual experience. You are abandoning the theme editor entirely.
So no more drag and drop.
None. Instead, you use a custom React front-end, meaning a team of developers builds a bespoke website from scratch, and it merely talks to Shopify servers through an API to pull product today and process cards.
And the guide is incredibly firm on this, right? Headless is only for the 20% of brands with heavy, dedicated engineering resources and highly complex content management needs.
Absolutely. For the other 80% of merchants, OS 2.0 is the destination. You should default to OS 2.0 and let headless be an evidence-driven decision, not just because you read a trendy buzzword in an e-commerce newsletter.
Exactly. And, to relieve some pressure for anyone listening, if you are on a vintage theme today, you do not have to migrate immediately.
That's right. Vintage is not officially deprecated by the platform. It still functions.
So when is the right time to pull the trigger?
You migrate when value drives the decision, not an artificial deadline.
Like if you're constantly paying an agency monthly retainers to hardcode things, that would be a free 2-second drag and drop action in OS 2.0.
Exactly. You're just bleeding money at that point. Or if you are locked out of vital new app features because the apps only support modern blocks, you move when the friction of the old system crosses the cost line of the renovation.
So what does this all mean when we pull it together? OS 2.0 isn't just a technical update with a shiny new name. It is a fundamental shift in the economics of running an online store.
It really is.
It takes expensive, time-consuming developer hours and transforms them into drag-and-drop merchant tasks. It protects the visual design while freeing the data.
But it only works if you have the operational discipline to keep the house clean, audit your apps, and avoid that JavaScript performance trap.
Right. It shifts the entire operating model. The platform is giving you a modern, modular house. It's up to you not to clutter the hallways.
Like I said.
But, there is one detail from the 2026 guide that I just cannot stop thinking about. It mentions that Horizon, the new flagship theme, features generative AI blocks.
Oh yes, that is a game changer.
Right. If the architecture is already entirely modular and Horizon is introducing AI-assisted blocks today, how long until the platform doesn't just give you the blank canvas and the Lego blocks, but actually just listens to a voice prompt?
It's coming.
Imagine just saying, generate a storefront that looks like a brutalist streetwear brand in Tokyo and bind my active inventory to the homepage grid. And boom, it just assembles the JSON templates instantly.
That's a fascinating thought. And if the tools become completely conversational like that, the value of a business shifts entirely away from how you build the store.
And rests purely on what you are actually selling and the community you build around it.
Exactly.
We've gone from hiring structural engineers just to move the sofa, to snapping blocks together in an editor, to potentially just asking the room to rearrange itself. At that point, what exactly is the difference between a merchant and a developer? We will leave you to chew on that one. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Stay curious, keep exploring, and we'll catch you next time.